Greetings and welcome to the second workshop in our Lean Startup Workshop. This is the advanced workshop. Recall that the first workshop we looked at the customer segments and value propositions as key elements of your business model and your business model canvas. In this workshop we're going to work on the remaining 7 elements of the business model canvas and go into each in detail. Finally, in the third workshop, we will work on customer development and customer discovery in particular, and dig into how to get and conduct customer-driven interviews. Recall that this material is best covered in Alexander Osterwald's book, Business Model Generation. This is the book in which Osterwalder and his co-author Yves Pigneur first laid out their model for the business model canvas. Also, before I go on, I want to make sure I recognize our teaching team: Jim Chung, the Executive Director for Innovation and Entrepreneurship; Melanie Fedry, the Coordinator for Social Entrepreneurship at GW; and I'm Lex McCusker, the Director of Student Entrepreneurship Programs. So, let's go back into the business model canvas. Recall that it has 9 elements and it's used to describe the key element, all the key elements of your business model. In workshop 1, we looked at customer segments, the element on the far right, as well as value propositions. Those two together form the product market fit, or sometimes called the customer solution fit. And those are the foundation, the fundamental elements of the business model canvas. Now we want to go through each of the other 7 elements and go into some detail on each of them. So, the third element is channels. This is how your product gets to customers, how you touch customers day to day once they become your customers. Let's think about distribution primarily, and we'll do it in 2 phases. Imagine, in this case, your channels are virtual. That is to say, you're reaching your customers through the internet. There are several ways to do that. Some obvious ways are through a dedicated e-commerce platform. You can have your own website that sells and distributes to customers. You might use somebody else's platform. If you're selling a mobile app, it's obvious that you want to be in the App Store or through the Android store. Sometimes you go through 2 levels of distribution. You sell through Amazon or through Walmart and their websites and use them to sell your product. This happens often in the case of aggregators. Aggregators are websites that sell similar products from a wide number of vendors. Etsy is one, Zappos does that for shoes. You might also sell through the social networking media, Facebook and Twitter, and then of course things like Groupon is a great way to sell, using the web to sell your product. But also there are physical channels. Again, you might sell your product, even if it's software, you might sell it via the web. But more commonly for a physical product, you might sell through somebody called an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer. An example of this is the tires on cars. Automobile manufacturers generally do not make the tires that they sell. They buy tires from somebody else, and as an OEM, they sell tires to new car buyers. You also might sell your product through system integrators. These are folks who take your product, combine it with other products into a more complicated solution, but something that has value for customers. In this case, you would sell to the system integrator. They bundle your product in with other products and sell to the end customer. Another obvious thing to do is to sell through a direct sales force. This is expensive and appropriate generally for more complicated products, but lots of companies have their own sales force. You might also sell through a value-added reseller. Sometimes there are folks who take your product and add some features to it, add some software, add some enhancements. For example, there are lots of companies that sell iPads with specialized software added to them to do point-of-sale terminals or to do product tracking devices. Those would be called value-added resellers. You can always sell your product through dealers. Automobile manufacturers, sometimes by law, have to sell their products through dealers. And then finally, perhaps the most obvious physical channel is through mass retailers. Walmart, Target, all of those companies sell lots and lots of products for lots and lots of companies. So as you think about your product and service and your value proposition, think about the channel you want to use to reach your customer. The key idea here is to understand the channel that your customer wants to use to buy and receive your product. So as part of your customer discovery, as you're talking to customers and you narrow down your value proposition, you want to then move to discussions of channels, as in how do they buy products like this? How do they want to buy products or services like the ones you're offering? Now, let's think a little bit more about distribution complexity. In this chart, we map out the various distribution options on a two-dimensional matrix. The y-axis is marketing complexity and the left axis is the solution complexity. And what you see is that as those two things increase, the channel that you use changes. So if the product complexity and the market complexity is simple, you can sell it on the web. It takes no support. You can maybe use telesales, but it's very easy to sell the individual products. There's not a lot of explanation required, and so that's the low cost and preferable alternative. If your product is more sophisticated or more complicated, then you may need to go through a retail store. You may need to have a salesman present to help customers buy your product. If your product gets more and more complicated, then value-added resellers might be required. You may need somebody who is actually putting something onto your product that makes it more valuable. If your product is more complicated still, then you may need your own direct sales force. You may need people who work for your company who go out and explain the product to customers and develop a personal relationship with your customers for the sale. Finally, at the very top end of market and solution complexity are the system integrators. These are the folks who put together very complicated solutions, typically for big customers, and they spend a lot of time and resources on that sales channel. What you'll notice is as you move to the right, the sales channel adds more value. Also, as you move to the left, you sell much higher volume. So you can sell, a system integrator may sell 1 or 2 systems in a year, whereas for a low-end consumer products, you might want to sell millions or even billions in a year. Let's take a minute now and change direction and talk a little bit about channel economics. Look at the chart on the right. This is intended to be a representation of the cost that's built into your business, mapped onto your list price and revenue. So on the right is the list price that the product is sold for, and for many products, some products for sure, there has to be some sort of a discount. So we back off a little bit to the left and show up the point where you are collecting revenue. Now, notice on the far left in the chart is the cost of goods. This is the cost the direct cost that goes into producing the product itself. It's the direct labor, it's facilities, it's raw materials that go into it. It's everything that goes into making the next product. And that's called the cost of goods, or sometimes cost of goods sold. What's left over is known as gross margin. Gross margin includes profit, selling, general administration, and your R&D cost. So all of the cost of selling your product comes out of that gross margin. Now, if you sell directly, that cost is part of your company because it's your direct sales force. But consider the situation where you're selling through distributors or retailers. Now, that piece of the gross margin is now divided up, and some of it goes to the distributors and the retailers. And what's left over is for your profit, other selling, general and administrative, and R&D. So the decision you have to make is the cost of the distribution, if you're going to go through distributors and resellers, low enough that they can do it more effectively, more cheaply than you can do it with a direct sales force. And of course, it has to be more effective. So you have to understand which piece of that revenue stream is going to go to distributors and which pieces are going to stay in-house. One last example. Let's talk about OEMing or licensing your product. If your product is part of somebody else's product, then when you start from the list price on the far right of the screen, the majority of the cost is going to be incurred by the OEM because it's in their product. So all of their reselling, all of their SG&A, all of their cost of goods sold, or most of their cost of goods sold is consumed by their product. What you are is just a sliver of their cost of goods. You become just a piece of theirs. So again, you need to be mindful of what your product contributes to their product, and that will determine how much their value as a distributor, as well as your value to them as part of their offering. Next element on the canvas is customer relationships. Customer relationships is how you get, keep, and grow your customers. Take a look at this funnel. This is a good way to represent the customer relationship situation. On the left, you start with getting customers, and there's a progression. You start with awareness of your product, which will move into interest and consideration, and ultimately into purchase of your product. You typically start that process with some kind of earned or paid media, and I think those are pretty obvious. Paid media is advertising. If you're going to put an ad in the Hatchet or in the Rival or in the Washington Post, you have to pay for that media. Earned media is publicity, something that you generate by doing something newsworthy, writing a blog, convincing somebody in the newspaper to write an article about you. All of those things are important for driving people to your product and making them aware of it. And then hopefully as you progress through that funnel and you get to the purchase, your customers become part of that. They can often start a viral sequence where they tell their friends, they tell other people, they contribute to your blogs, and that can start a virtuous cycle that fills up that pipeline and moves product to you. Second phase is in the middle. This is keeping customers. And there are techniques for this. You can do loyalty programs, you can do product updates and new features, checking in with customers on a regular basis, having a user group, doing customer satisfaction surveys. Lots of things you can do to hold on to those customers. And it's important because typically keeping a customer is much less expensive than getting the customers in the first place, right? So if you have a product where there is recurring revenue, customers are buying upgrades and new things from you, having them familiar with you and knowing with you is much cheaper and much easier way to keep those customers than it is to get them in the first place. And then finally, you want to think about growing customers. Are there ways that you can get customers to buy more things from you? You can unbundle your offers. You can sell separate pieces. You can upsell. You can cross-sell, sell them different products, sell a customer who buys from one part of your company with another part of your company. Or you can refer them. You can get them to refer other customers to you, for example. So again, get, keep, and hold is important to think through how you're going to do all of those things. Now there's some concepts to lay on top of this. That first part, the customer acquisition cost, it's very important to know how much it's going to cost you to get each customer. How much are you going to spend in paid media? How much are you going to do to get those customers into buying your product? Very important to know that customer acquisition cost. Second concept is you want to understand your churn. How often customers leave you, how often they go to or don't come back, how often they go to other customers. The churn is very important to understand, in large part because losing customers is costly to you, because then you have to reacquire or acquire a more expensive customer to replace them. That churn and then the efforts you do to grow customers is called the customer lifetime value of your product. You also want to be thinking about how much revenue can you get from customers over the lifetime of the product. Those concepts are very important and you need to think about them. As we go forward, you want to have a business model where the lifetime value to you of the customer far exceeds the customer acquisition cost, right? So as you do those calculations, you're looking for a business model where the lifetime value exceeds the customer acquisition cost. Some rules of thumb, if you're using a software as a service model, for example, your lifetime value should be at least 3 times the customer acquisition cost. You want to break even, that is whatever you spend for that customer should be returned to you in a year. And generally your churn should be in the low single digits. 2.5% is a good number. Lower is always better. You want to keep the churn low for all the reasons we discussed. All right, next topic is revenue streams. How do you get money into your company? Where does the money come from? So you want to think about revenue streams in two ways. Think about first the revenue model. What is your strategy for generating cash from each of the customer segments? We'll also talk about market size. It's important that you know the market size. And I want to distinguish the revenue model from pricing model. Pricing is a tactical thing. It's how you set the actual dollar price for each product or service you're selling. And we'll talk about that in some detail. The key element there is whether you price on cost or value. So think about what some possible revenue models are. In this chart, we talk about products that are physical or software, and we talk about channels that are either on the web or physical channels of distribution. So if you have a software product, there's lots of different revenue models. You might sell the product straight out. You might license it on a per-use basis or on a per-user basis. You might sell a subscription, like a magazine subscription. So much per month to use the product. And of course, you always want to be looking at opportunity for a next sell and an upsell for those customers. But generally, you're going to do direct sales. But also think about referrals. Think about what you might do to get customers to refer one of your customers to somebody else in a similar line of business. They might find that valuable and be willing to contribute revenue to your company just by connecting them with one of your customers. On the physical side, it's similar, but can be a little bit different. Clearly, there's referral revenue that's available. There's revenue from affiliates. Companies might want to partner with you and sell products with you collaboratively. Clearly, the information that you gather about your customer has value. Email lists and other demographics can be sold, and there's lots of things you can do on the back end to sell other products and services. So as you're thinking about revenue models, think about multiple ways to get revenue. Think about direct sales. Think about leasing. There's lots of ways you can rent products. There are freemium models, right? There are products that you might want to give away so that you can sell other products. The classic example is razors and blades, right? You might give away a razor or sell it very cheaply in anticipation that customers will then buy the blades on a recurring basis to you. So lots and lots of different ways to think about revenue. Explore lots of options and try to be creative here. Let's spend a minute on market size. So one thing you also want to have as part of your business model is an understanding of the market size. And the market size comes in really three different things. What total available market is the total possible market that could be available if you sold product to everybody on the planet who could use it. The served available market is the total market that could use your product as your business model is currently configured. And finally, the served available market is that market that you expect to capture with the current state of your business model and your product. Okay? Now, it's important to take some time and try to calculate these things because you want to be able to convince yourself that there's a large enough market out there that if you capture a small percentage, and frankly you're likely to capture just a small percentage, there is enough of a market that can sustain your business. Okay? So this is really a sanity check that you are playing into a market that's big enough for you to have a high probability of success. Let's take an example. The example I have is a hypothetical mobile app. It's intended for use by senior citizens. I don't know what it does, but it's just an example. So imagine an app for senior citizens. You've decided you're going to sell it through nursing homes and through doctors who have large gerontological practices, and you've done some modeling for your first year, and you think you can sell 200 you think you'll get 20,000 downloads in the first year. All right. So how does that map onto this? So in our example, the smartphone app for seniors, the total available market would be all seniors with smartphones. Now notice I didn't say all seniors. So you have to do a little bit of work and maybe get to the library and dig in a little bit on this. You'd want to know the number of seniors who have smartphones. They would be the total available market for this hypothetical app. Served available market would be seniors in large retirement homes and who use large gerontological practices, because that's the distribution channel that you've chosen in your current business model. And then finally, your served obtainable market is 20,000 units, because that's what you're projecting to sell in the first year. So in this particular example, we've projected 20,000 downloads. As a footnote, it's really important that you do your projections of sales top down. That is, just saying I'm going to get 1% of a market is not credible. You want to really think about who you're going to sell to and how many units you're going to sell to them, and do that calculation of your obtainable market in a top-down fashion rather than a bottom-up fashion. Just as a footnote, the GW Library Services offer lots of resources to help you find this kind of market information. So make use of the folks in Gelman that can help you do this. All right, so you're thinking about your revenue model. What are the questions you're going to ask? First questions are, what are my customers paying for, and what capacity do my customers have to pay? This is information you will have already gathered, because as part of your value proposition, you really have to understand what it is that customers value in your product and service offering, and that's what they're going to pay for. You've also done a lot of work on your customer segments. You understand them, so you understand their capacity to pay and what it's really worth to them for your product and service. You also want to think about some other things, how you will package your product and how you will price your offering. So let's talk about pricing next. There's two basic ways to do pricing: cost-based and value-based. Cost-based is common, but not the preferred way. But lots of folks do cost-based pricing. That is, you understand the cost of your product and then price it a little bit higher, price some margin on top of it. You see this in volume pricing. So lots of companies will give you a discount for volume purchases, because in fact the cost to them, it goes down considerably if they're selling at volume. You also see this in portfolio pricing. If you're buying a set of products from a company, they will also often reduce the price of that, because again, their costs are going down. The most common way is time and material pricing. This is mostly done in the government and public utilities sector, where you agree that the customer will bear the cost of the time and of the materials and any time and effort that goes into it, and an agreed upon margin. These are ways to do your pricing in certain industries and certain segments. Generally not the best way to do it for most companies. The better way to do it is value-based pricing. That is, to price your product or service based on the buyer's perceived value. What do they think is the value? What's the value of them to them? And again, you've uncovered this because in your customer discovery, you really understand their value proposition, right? So consider, as an example, consider Beats earphones. Beats earphones cost very little to make, tens of dollars to make, and yet they sell for hundreds of dollars in the marketplace, right? And so it would not make sense to do cost-based pricing for this product, because the cost is so small, but the value is high. Beats have an intangible value. They have cachet, they have prestige, and customers perceive them as very valuable, and so you can charge a very high price for this product. So think hard about what the value is that your product provides to customers. Does it provide them time saving? Does it provide them efficiency? Does it save them money in some way? And price it accordingly. Now, having said that, there's two other considerations. One is you have to price it relative to what the competition is pricing, right? So you're not selling your product in a vacuum, you're selling it relative to other alternatives they might have. So competition will often put an upper limit on what you can charge for pricing. And then finally, one of the key things to value-based pricing is that value changes, and sometimes it can change quite dramatically. So hotels, for example, the value of a room in a hotel varies widely with how full that hotel is. So you'll notice if you call up a hotel a week in advance and buy a room, the price will be different than if you call up the night before and they have lots of rooms available. So airlines do this for tickets on planes. Value changes over time, so your pricing can also be dynamic. All right, let's take another example on pricing models. This is a company called MAM Optics. And what you need to know about MAM Optics is they make a very expensive medical device that can detect cancer, can detect mammalian cancer very early, much earlier than other systems can do it. And so it's a very valuable device in that the early detection allows for early treatment and a much higher probability of cure. And so this company tried to decide how they would sell this product. So there were 4 different potential revenue streams from the product. One is the cost of the device. They could just sell the device. Another is a service contract. They could charge the customers for ongoing maintenance and service. They could charge a per-use fee. That is, every time you use the system, you could be charged a fee. And then the consumables. This product has certain things that have to be replenished every once in a while, and so they could charge for those consumables as well. And so they considered 4 different options. One is just on the left you see the equipment sale. Just sell the product for $50,000 and charge a service fee. They also considered leasing the product, so leasing it for $5,000 a year, but then adding a heftier service fee on top of it. They considered a third model, the per-use model, where they sold the product for an intermediate price, but then charged a fee per use. And then finally, they also considered the 4th opportunity, where they would make their money primarily on consumables. So sell the product, again, for a lower price, but charge for each of the consumables that the customer wanted. So how did they decide? Again, part of their customer discovery. They talked a lot to their customers about where the value was to them and how they wanted to purchase. In the end, they chose Model 3. The reason is the customers did not want to make the big outlay up front, the $50,000 equipment price. They wanted a smaller price. They also didn't want to be locked into a lease, and so the prospect of buying it at a lower price was attractive to them. They also liked the idea of a per-use fee because they charged per use. So if they were paying MAM Optics $50 per use and charging the customers $100 per use, they had a low-risk way to keep their costs low and only incur costs when they also incurred revenue. So that's how their approach to deciding their revenue and pricing model. All right. Next, let's go to partners. Partners are the key people and suppliers you need to make the business model work. And Jim will discuss that.
Hi, I'm Jim Chung, and I'm the Executive Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the George Washington University. So I'm going to continue the conversation about the business model canvas and the additional boxes on the left side of the canvas, where we're starting to look at what are the cost structures of delivering your business model. The first one I'm going to talk about are partners. So who are the key partners and suppliers that you need in order to make the business model work? This is critical because as a startup, you just don't have the resources you need to be able to compete with the incumbent market leaders. They may be large companies with many more resources. They already have customers, and they just have a huge advantage over you. So it's really impossible for most startups to deliver everything they need to with what they have at the beginning of their journey. So you need to be very careful and very thoughtful about who you're going to partner with. So let's go over what is a partner. On the left side of this slide, you'll see that a partner is somebody or an organization that has shared economics. Now, what we mean by that is that you and they share economics, that when they're successful, when you make money, they make money. If you lose money, they lose money. So there's shared economics. It's related to shared success and failure. It's not necessarily related just to revenue, but it can be related to things like reputation. Third thing there is co-development. And by co-development, we mean working together to build, say, a new product, working together to build out a new market. This is co-development. And fourth is that you should have a common customer. So you may be selling to the same customer. Now, you may not have all 4 of these in a partner, but you need to have at least one of these in order for a partnership to work. The right side of the slide, you'll see that these are the reasons why you might want to have a partner. The first bullet point there is on faster time to market. Now, as a startup, you have, as I mentioned, very little resources. Time is critical. You can't take a long time to develop your market because you're going to run out of money. So partnerships are really valuable when they can get you to market faster. The second thing is that partnerships can often provide a broader product offering. You may have only a small part of an overall solution. You may have to partner with other companies, whether it's larger companies or other startups, to create a complete solution that's complete enough for a customer to be interested in buying it. Third is capital efficiency. By partnering with somebody, you may have to spend less money, or both of you may have to spend less money on developing a new product or a new market or advertising. If you can do it together, you're saving money. Fourth thing there is unique customer knowledge or expertise. So you, as a startup, may have specialized technology that your partners don't have. And your partners may have understanding about a certain market or a complementary technology that you don't have. But together, you can create something greater. And then finally, there's access to new markets. As a startup, you don't have customers yet, but your partners may have existing customers that they can plug you into. This is really important. Have to remember, however, that as a startup, you may have a need for these larger partners or other partners, but you always have to be thinking about why would they need you. A large company is just often not as interested in working with a startup because you may be just a tiny blip on their P&L. Whereas for you, that partner may be the difference between life and death. So there's an asymmetry there that you have to be aware of. When you're approaching these partners, you always have to be thinking about not just what you need, but what do they need. Okay, now let's look at the different types of partnerships and the different risks associated with partnerships. The strategic alliances. Strategic alliances are when you're partnering with another organization or group or person in order to fill the gaps in your product offering. You may have a strong technology or a strong product, but you may not have the ability to provide after service or customer service or be able to provide the marketing or advertising. I mean, those are all different reasons why you might get into a strategic alliance so that you can fill in your gaps. Second thing is joint business development. This is related to the capital efficiency, for example, I talked about earlier, or maybe about access to markets. But by working with a partner, you may be able to jointly develop business that separately you may not have been able to do. Co-opetition is where you are working with competitors on something where you do have a mutual interest in pursuing. One of the common ways of doing this are trade shows or working through an industry association. And then the last one there is if you have a virtual startup or an internet-based startup, you may be looking for partners to develop traffic for you, especially common with advertising startups. On the right side of the slide, we have here what are the risks of partnership. So it's not all roses when you partner with another group. There are risks involved with any partnership that you should be aware of as you're going into them. The first there is an impedance mismatch. And by impedance, what I mean there is you may be wanting to move at light speed, but your partner may be a large corporation where they are going through 20 or 30 layers of approvals, where they have to wait for their annual budget to come through. So you may be at different speeds. That is something that you have to be aware of when you're getting into negotiations with a potential partner. Second thing is that if there's no clear ownership of who the customers are or who has access to the customer, then lines of communication get confused, your customers can get confused, and that may cause problems. Third thing there is lack of shared vision and or product design. You have to be on the same page about where you believe your product is going. If your partner does not share that vision with you, you would want to think twice about whether or not they're a good partner for you. Now, personnel and strategy churn. Oftentimes in large organizations, you'll find that the person that you're talking to, the decision maker or the negotiator, may all of a sudden move on, get promoted, move to another company, or get fired. And then you've lost your champion within the organization and you have to start over again. It's different from you, where you've got a small team and you're not likely to be churning as much as a large organization. So you have to be aware of that. And when you're making partnerships, to make sure that that you are working with multiple channels within the organization. Next thing there is intellectual property issues, IP issues. You want to be careful with not revealing the crown jewels to your potential partner so that you lose your intellectual property. And then finally, partnerships should always have a defined end, meaning you don't always need that partner necessarily, and they're not always going to need you. So you have to think about the end game and how you might disengage when the partnership is no longer useful. Okay, let's move on to key resources now. Now, key resources are what are the things that you need, what are the capabilities and the resources that you need to be successful with your business model. There are 4 critical resource categories. The first is physical, second is financial, third is human, and the final is intellectual. Now, physical resources, key resources, are things like your company facilities. Do you have access, or do you have a building? Do you have office space? Do you have a manufacturing facility someplace? Those are the physical key resources you have that you will need in order to be successful. On the financial side, you may have access to sources of funding, either relationships to, say, a venture capital investor, or to a bank, or to a rich uncle that provide resources to you on the financial side that will help you to continue your business model. Third are human resources, where you have access to qualified employees or to mentors, teachers, coaches, and advisors. So being students or faculty or staff members here at GW, you obviously have a resource here at the university in terms of being able to access your fellow students, being able to access quality mentors and advisors and faculty here at the university to help you move forward. And then finally, there's the intellectual. So these may include patents or trademarks, copyrights, licenses that you have developed that make your product unique and defensible, so that other potential competitors cannot copy what you're doing. So these are the 4 critical resources that you need to have, that you may need to have in order for your business model to move forward. Okay, let's move on to key activities. What key activities do you need to be successful? So these are the kinds of things that you are doing on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to make sure that your business model is going to be viable. Now, these can be categorized into 3 different categories. The first is production-based activities. The second are problem-solving activities. And then finally, there's the platform and network activities. So under production, if you're doing an app or software, you will need to be continuously developing the software and building it out. So you'll need, the flip side of this is on the resource side, you're going to need access to developers, and these developers are going to be developing the software. If you have a physical product, you may have to do some supply chain management and keep track of where all your parts are coming from and how you're distributing them, etc. So that would be an important part of your production side. Problem-solving key activities would be about how do you manage all the knowledge and the research that you're developing. How do you hire quickly? How do you find the people that you need? How do you get access to the developers? How do you get access to the manufacturing talent that you need, etc. Finally, there's the platform and network key activities, and these are around things like how do you get your brand out there? How do you continue to service your product after it's sold? These are all key activities that most startups need, or actually all organizations need, in order to continue as viable businesses. So the next block, the bottom block on the left side of the business model canvas, are around cost structure. What are the most important costs that you need in order to be able to deliver your value proposition to your customers and to continue your business model? So the cost structure should be built around metrics that matter. Here, the metrics that matter are things that are being drawn out of your business model canvas. We're not worried here about office supplies, where how much your pens and things are going to cost, but what's really critical to making your business work. So these are things about delivering your value proposition, your key activities, key resources, and key partners. You have heard earlier from Lex about some of the key other costs that are required around customer acquisition. For example, your customer acquisition costs. What are some of the things that you may have to address are things like churn. If you're losing customers on a monthly basis, how do you decrease that churn rate? Is that through better customer service, through more advertising, et cetera? On the right side of the slide here, we have the types of costs. And these are things that are going to be around how much it costs to build your product, how much it costs to operate as a business. Some of these costs are going to be fixed costs, things, for example, like your office space. Some are going to be variable costs, things like how many sensors do you have to buy if you are building a sensor-based product. That will vary according to how many products you actually sell. And then your pricing is going to depend on how much you sell as well, because there are economies of scale and scope that you can take advantage of as your quantity of products sold increases or as the size of your organization increases. So these all will feed into what your ultimate cost structure will be. Okay, here I'm going to switch gears a bit and then go into another case study around, I'm going to focus here on partnerships. And you'll recognize if you listen to the first lecture about Agamatrix. Agamatrix, to remind you, and for those of you who weren't who haven't listened to the first lecture, Agamatrix is a company that I invested in my previous career as a venture capital investor that does blood glucose monitors. Invested in this company back, I think, around 2003 or 2004. This slide here just shows you the huge complex network that we had developed around Agamatrix at the time. Now, as a burgeoning startup where we were looking for partners, we looked at this kind of network, and it was really daunting trying to figure out, okay, who are we going to partner with? Well, since we didn't have customer development back then, and we didn't really know what we were doing, we decided to try to pursue all of them. So what I'm going to talk about now is a story of our partnership journey and trying to figure out who were the right partners for us. And we made lots of mistakes. So whenever you're doing a partnership type of inquiry, you're trying to figure out whether or not the capability, the key resource, or the key activity, or the key resource or the key activity is something that you want to build yourself, whether it's something you want to buy, or whether it's something you need to partner on. Now, being a startup, you probably aren't going to buy it. So here I'm just talking about building or partner. Probably not going to buy it because you just don't have those kind of capabilities in terms of financial resources. But with the technology, that was our first question. Do we focus in on building the technology and furthering the technology ourselves, or do we partner with a larger organization, say a Johnson & Johnson or a Medtronic or another organization where they already had strong technical capabilities and work through them as partners? What we decided in this instance is that we really couldn't find a good reason to partner based on those different principles or reasons to partner that I had mentioned earlier, whether it was faster time to market, et cetera. Those weren't as compelling as the need to keep the technology as our core resource, something that we didn't want to share. So in this case, we decided that it was something that we would keep. Second thing that question that we had to do was we needed to build the meters themselves. The meters are the actual electronic gizmo that does the measuring, and we didn't have obviously the manufacturing capacity to do that ourselves. So is this something we had to build, or is this something that we had to partner with? Third question is whether or not we needed to build our own strips, or whether we need to partner with somebody to get strips. Now, the strips are the disposable piece of the blood glucose monitoring process, where you put the blood, you plug it into the meter, and then you throw it away later on. And there's a constant need for these for these test strips by the diabetics who are testing their blood on a daily basis. So it can be a significant cost. And then finally, there's distribution. So the fourth thing we need to figure out whether or not we needed to do was whether there was how to deliver. What is the channel by which we wanted to deliver the products, whether that meant retail or direct sales, et cetera. The question on the technology was whether to build or partner. The technology that was developed by the team was around dynamic signal processing. So the ability to apply multiple tests, voltages, signals to the electrochemical sensor to get differential responses to see what kind of chemicals or whether there was blood glucose or whether it's being blocked by vitamin C or other kinds of chemicals. So this was their big technological breakthrough. What we did is we looked at, and as I mentioned earlier, we really decided that this is something that we needed to do internally. So we went out and we decided this was a key resource that we had to build ourselves. This is the original technology team. And we went around and really hired everybody we could find around the world who had some expertise, technical expertise around dynamic signal processing. The folks we have on this slide here are from Australia, from China, from the United States. Okay, now we had the builder partner question on the meter itself. For those of you who saw the first lecture, this is the first prototype of the meter. The question here was whether or not this was something we wanted to build our own manufacturing capacity or not. And we decided here that this was not a core or a critical resource or activity for the company, but it was something that we could partner with an outside partner with because it wasn't going to get us to market faster by building it ourselves. In fact, it would make us go slower because it would have taken us time to raise the money to actually build a new facility, et cetera. So we ended up partnering with a company out in China that did contract manufacturing for electronics. Then we needed to look at whether or not to build or partner on building the strips. And here is where we had sort of one of our first kind of little bit of a stumble, is that we thought, well, the strips are a key resource and a key activity that we have to control ourselves. So you'll see on this slide, this is our first manufacturing facility. It's actually in the basement of my old VC firm where they set up a clean room. And my desk is actually just a couple desks over from the clean room. It was useful for us from a scientific and technical perspective of learning what was required in terms of building these test strips. But it clearly was not the kind of facility where we could start pumping out 1 billion test strips a year. It was a batch sort of research facility, useful at the time, but clearly not something that was going to work for the long term. So what we decided here is that we really needed to partner. And we need to go out and find somebody who was already making the strips, but would be willing to partner with us. And so we had to go overseas for that. So we decided to partner with a company out in Korea called iSense. They were a startup as well. They already had a meter. They already had a manufacturing facility that was doing test strips, but they had not entered the US market. They hadn't gotten FDA approval yet. So they were in a similar situation to us in that they needed to have a partner in order to build out their product offering. So we were fortunate to be able to find iSense. And iSense today is now a public company in Korea. You can see from this slide here, these are their manufacturing facilities. State-of-the-art, top-notch manufacturing facility and company out in Korea on the Kosdaq stock market. I looked them up last week. Their market value right now is around 500 billion won, which translates to around $500 million. So we partnered with them first, and they continue to be a partner, but we're also now building our own facility out in China. So you see from the slide, that's the skeleton of the new facility that's being built out in China. So remember I had talked earlier about how you want to be able to, may need to partner first, but you may want to build your technology or you build your key activity and key resources later. And then so that's what we did here. So you need to think about how you start to make that transition as well. And fortunately, we've had a very good relationship with iSense, so that continues today. So now I'm going to talk about distribution. And distribution also can be as analogous to the channel. So how are you going to deliver your product to your customer? And when Agamatrix started out, we thought we would do a direct sales approach. So we would create our own sales force and sell directly to the diabetics. That was what our initial idea was. Second thing that we tried was selling through the retail chain. So now we have our sales force trying to sell to the retail chains, and then the retail chains would handle the distribution to the customers. Then what we tried to do was go to the large pharma companies like the Johnson & Johnsons and the Medtronics and see if they would partner with us to sell to the retail chains, because we weren't successful trying to sell directly to the retail chains. That didn't work out. So then we moved towards something that we hadn't even known about before entering this market, the home delivery services. And these are distributors that are not in retail, but they're actually delivering the products by mail service to their customers. And this is where we had our first breakthrough. And then finally, the final one that approach that we took that worked out, at least in our first try, was by creating a device that plugged into an Apple iPhone. And this became the first FDA-approved medical device for the iPhone. And Apple became a partner in distribution. So I'll go through this journey of how we stumbled and how we eventually found our way. So first, the distribution through direct sales. You may recognize this picture as being Times Square. So one of the things that we try to do is go direct to the customer, and even bought out billboard space in Times Square. Now, this was a mistake because we did not understand how our customers wanted to buy their products or how they wanted to learn about their products. And they didn't want to learn about them from billboards in Times Square. That was one thing that we learned. So this was not successful. The one that we were successful with, where we were able to develop a strategic alliance for distribution, was with a company called Liberty Medical. Liberty Medical, for those of you who are old enough to remember the commercials, was a company that did quite a bit of advertising on TV with Wilford Brimley, who's also known as the Quaker Oats guy, right? So he was a very famous actor. And Liberty Medical had a very strong brand out in the market. What they did was they delivered blood glucose monitors and test strips on a regular basis and handled all of the insurance paperwork and payment for the customers, so that the customers never actually had to pay anything out of pocket, never had to fill out any paperwork with the insurance companies, and never even had to order the test strips, because Liberty Medical would just send it to them on a monthly basis. And we found out that this was a really effective way of reaching customers, because that was how at least this segment of customers wanted to be reached, was no hassle, low cost. And what Liberty Medical cared about was that they were getting paid by insurance or reimbursed by insurance. So for them, the lower the cost they could get, the better. That was absolutely critical to their bottom line. So for them, they wanted to partner with a low-cost partner. Now, fortunately for us, the technology that we had developed enabled our meters to be very low cost, because we were able to address a lot of the manufacturing issues and other things that other blood glucose manufacturers had to spend more money on. So we were able to get to a lower cost point. We were also able to develop a strategic alliance for distribution with retail partners, but only after we were able to partner up with Liberty Medical and establish a track record. And this provided the retailers with another product line for them, so that they did have a broader product offering. We were also able to develop a strategic alliance for distribution with Apple. For us, Apple was a new way of reaching a completely different market segment. And for Apple, it was a way for them to start offering a whole new product sector, which was medical devices for their app. Medical devices for their iPhone. Today, the main channel and main partner for the Agamatrix products is Sanofi Aventis. Sanofi Aventis is a large pharmaceutical company. At the time, they did not have a blood glucose monitoring product line, but they had very extensive insulin delivery products. So for them, being able to partner with Agamatrix was a way for them to start delivering a new product offering, and it enabled enabled Agamatrix to be able to access a completely new market with a very well-financed and resourced partner. So the key partnership takeaways that I want to stress is that when you're working with partners, you need to have a clear give and take. You have to understand that your partners are you're going to have inherent asymmetries in your relationship with your partners, that they may have greater resources or size or power, and you want to be aware of these as you're getting into your negotiations. You also want to be aware that there's a difference between early evangelists and mainstream partners. In my story, you might have remember that we originally tried to approach the retail chains, and they would not partner with us until we had already established ourselves as a reliable company through Liberty Medical's distribution. So Liberty Medical was an early evangelist, but the retail chains were not. When you're building out your partnership network, you want to make sure that you're on your best behavior, because it is a network and people know and talk to each other, so you'll get a reputation. The last point there is to what I call look for the Avis partner. And Avis doesn't have this advertising campaign anymore, but they used to have an advertising campaign where they said that they tried harder because they were number 2. So what you'll often find when you're approaching partners is that the number 1 market leader is often not the innovator. In fact, they're the ones who are trying to squash innovation because they want to maintain their market share. It's usually the number 2 or maybe number 3 player in the market who's looking for innovations because they want to become the market leader. So those are the kinds of partners that you want to try to look for. Thank you.
Let's finish this workshop with a list of books, videos, and other web resources that might be helpful for you if you want to dig in further, and some other resources that will be useful to you. First of all, I mentioned at the outset the Startup Owner's Manual. This is the single best book on the lean startup method. Frankly, it's more of a reference book than a reading book. It's one that you want to go to when you have questions and when you get into trouble. Also, there's an excellent article by Steve Blank in the Harvard Business Review, Why the Lean Startup Changes Everything. This is the article that really brought the lean startup method into the forefront and into prominence in the business community. On the video side, there is a course at Udacity, How to Build a Startup, the Lean LaunchPad. This is a set of video modules by Steve Blank, probably 100 modules, all short, 1 or 2 minutes, that go through all of the basic concept of the lean startup method and talk about every element of the business model canvas, and goes into some good detail on how to do your customer discovery. I highly recommend this course at Udacity. The next book that you need to have in your library is the Business Model Canvas book by Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. This is the book in which Osterwalder first laid out the business model canvas. For those of you who like video, there are 2 excellent Osterwalder videos on the business model canvas. Both of them are on YouTube. I frankly recommend the 21-minute, the longer video, but the 3.5-3.5-minute video is also excellent. Now, there are some online tools to help you do your business model canvas. You can do your business model canvas on a whiteboard with stickies, but there are good tools, one a set from Strategizer and then another set from Canvanizer. The Canvanizer, Strategizer also has a great set of video tools, so I recommend these YouTube videos from Strategizer that talk about how to go about and build your business model canvas. So for those of you who want to do some prototyping or building your minimum viable product, I recommend the online video from Tom Chi. It's from a TED Talk, and it does a very nice job on how to do rapid prototyping. Also, Osterwalder has a second book that focuses on value proposition design, primarily around the customer segments and value propositions. Again, this book also written with Yves Pigneur, and I recommend that. One of the nice tools that comes from that book is something called the Value Proposition Canvas. This large, fairly detailed, 1-page document lays out a great set of questions and hints and ways to think about both your customer segments and the value proposition, the value you bring to them. This is a wonderful tool for thinking through your customer solution fit. If you want to dig in more on this notion of customer solution fit or product market fit, which it's also called, there are 3 good articles on the web, one by Mark Andreessen, another by Sean Ellis, and a third one by Callie Albright. Again, good reading if you want to dig in further on this topic. Finally, you can always get additional information and good support resources from 3 places on campus and their respective websites, one from the Office of Entrepreneurship, one from the New Venture Competition website, and of course from the GW Upstart website. Good places for any person in the GW entrepreneurship community to go to find help with their startup. Thank you very much.